Guys, and welcome to another how-to video. In today's video, I'm going to be showing you guys how to do the rear bearings on your Golf Mk4 platform car. So that will actually cover also the Polo 9N, which is very similar, the Polo 6N2, the Golf Mk4, the Bora, the Seat León, the Škoda Octavia, and maybe the Fabia as well, that run kind of very similar rear stub axle thing. So this is going to cover quite a few cars. Before we get onto this, we're going to move over to the bench and I'm going to show you guys exactly what tools you need. So before you start the job, you don't want to start the job in the middle of the job, then you realize you need a tool that you don't actually have. So what we're going to do is we're going to start off with a tool check and make sure you guys have all the tools needed to do this job. So these are the tools you're going to need. Nothing really special here apart from maybe this one socket, which is a 13mm socket, and it's got to be a 12 point, which we call a 12 point. Not a 6-sided one, because the nuts are this kind of shape on the back of the Mk4 Golf. So you need an angle grinder, and I'll get into that why you need an angle grinder 90% of the time, not most of the time. A nice sledgehammer, a couple of chisels, 15mm, 13mm spanner, 17mm socket for the wheels, side cutters, a large Phillips screwdriver, and a breaker bar is needed, as well as you will need a torque wrench if you do have one. I'll put the torque settings up on the screen at the appropriate time so you can torque up the bearings as you want. All right, guys, so let's now move over, jack the car up. So now that we've gone over the tools that we actually need to do the job, next thing is obviously use a good trolley jack as well as an axle stand. Always use an axle stand when you're working under the car, because the last thing you want is actually for it to fall on you. For added protection, I always put the wheel underneath the car just in case, for some strange reason, the axle stand gives up. And as you can see, I've also got the jack underneath it as well. So the first thing we're going to do is going to get that 15mm spanner and the 13 and actually remove the caliper bolts. There's two of them, one at the top, one at the bottom. That's one off, and that's the second one off. Now, at this point, go into the car and release the handbrake, because otherwise you're not going to get the caliper off. It should just slide off. Sometimes it can be a bit hard. You might need to get like a big screwdriver to wedge it off, or even one of the spanners. There we go. Take the pads out, and also remember which side the pad goes on. They're marked, so when you replace them back on, you don't get the pads mixed up from side to side. It's important. Now here, this is where this may differ on some of these cars. As you can see here, I've got vented discs on the rear. Some cars, most cars have solids, and I think you can do this on both, which I'm going to show you. It's a little trick. If you remove this Phillips here, which you're going to have to anyway, we can actually slide the disc out with the carrier in place, so it actually saves messing around with that. So I've been quite lucky with this. It's actually come off. Sometimes, you know, you should always use penetrating oil, and also I find a small tap with the hammer can actually free it up. Now, let's see if I can, hopefully, I'll show you what I mean. You see, you don't need to, quite easy, right? Okay, so now this has exposed the bearing flange and the main bearing housing itself. Now, underneath this cover is where the nut is hiding. So you obviously need to remove this with a chisel and that hammer. It's quite easy. So now is the moment for that 12-point 13mm socket and the breaker bar. And then let's see if we can get this off. There we go. And now let's see if we're lucky or not, if we're going to need the angle grinder. Most of the times, 90% of the time, unfortunately, I do need the grinder and the chisel and the hammer. But hopefully, maybe not actually. Let's see if we can, if I pull this off. No, it's pretty much stuck on there. All right, so let's get the hammer and the chisel. And we'll hit it from this direction behind here and actually get it to come out. Now that was actually tougher than usual. I've never had it that bad, and it's actually taken the ABS ring off with it as well, as you can see. This, you need that, so make sure that's not damaged because we need to put it on the new one. There's the bearings. Wow, it's really stuck on there. Okay, so I literally just pulled it and it broke away. And let's get this little bit off there as well. There's actually another little bit here as well, and get some side cutters, pliers, see if I can remove that little bit there. And also be very careful of this little bit that's sticking out here, because that's actually the ABS sensor, and you don't want to damage that in any shape, way or form. Okay, let me just try my luck and see with the chisel if that will actually come off. Now it's important that you don't actually go through the bearing and actually, you know, start grinding into the actual kind of shoulder where the bearing sits on. So you've got to be careful, take your time. Now the reason why the grinder is a great thing is because one, it puts heat into it, as well as now I've kind of ground into it, as you can see, and it's also giving me a little shoulder where I can hopefully so I've given it a good few whacks, and let's see if I can actually, there we go. You see that move, and there you go. It's just, oh, I just slightly nipped it, but it's not too bad. But yeah, you see that's how you do it. Gives you kind of a nice thing to actually, one, like I said, puts heat into it, and that's the only way you can do it. You can get a puller on there, but it's going to be, there's literally no edge for a puller to go on there, as well as, you know, this should be a job that you can do without really special tools like a puller and stuff. So yeah, that's off, and now really all we need to do is clean this up, put a little bit of grease on there, and slide the new one on. But before we do that, let's go over to the bench. So we've got the old and the new side by side. I've actually given the ABS ring a little clean with a wire brush, and literally all we need to do is just literally maybe give it a little tap just to make sure. Nothing too crazy. And that's it. And like I said, all we do is we'll put a little bit of grease on there. All right, I'm just going to put a bit of copper grease. Maybe because I've been such a long time in the UK, I tend to put a bit of copper grease on most things, especially kind of suspension wise, so they don't seize up, and it makes it easier for the next person behind me, or even if me, it could be me in a few years' time that needs to do this job again. At least I've made my job just that little bit easier. Okay, so now that's all done. Let's go over to the car and slide this on. Now this is going to be tricky because it's a very tight fit, and here we go. Got it on. Perfect. Now, as you can see, it didn't go all the way, so what you should do, don't hammer it on. Put the knot on, and it'll work it nice and evenly to the back, and you've got no chance then of damaging the bearing in any way. Okay, so now before you tighten it up and torque it up, just nip it up, make sure it rotates freely and there's no issues there. You can't hear anything grinding or catching. Make sure it rotates. Okay, now here I'm going to put on the screen the torque settings. There we go, that feels about right for me. Still rotates freely, and that's it, and let's just reverse the process. There we have it, guys. Quick, easy, short video, shows you what to do step by step. Thanks for watching. Ding-a-ling-a-ling, click on the notification bell, and be safe, guys.